Men of Reddit. What do women do that they think is okay but is actually creepy? Story 1. Perving on men. So many times in the workplace, I've heard women say what they would like to do to a certain man, almost drooling in public. If a man said the same comments, they'd be fired. Story 2. Speaking possessively about their male friends and claim men that they see, most often when they think men can't hear. Story 3. You break up a relationship and your friends proceed to come at you like angry mobs for it. Story 4. I've had this happen a few times, but I don't know if it is more common or less common. When I go to a bar for a drink on, say, Friday night, I usually go with friends. I'll head to the bathroom and sometimes the bar will be crowded, so I'll have to slip through a group of people. Several times I'll get rubbed or caressed by women, sometimes in the crotch groin, sometimes in the chest or shoulders. It's not wanted, nor am I signaling I want to be touched, just saying excuse me and going past. It bothers me every time. That's incredibly f***ed up. I don't know how anyone, male or female, would find this to be appropriate behavior. Story 5. Touching me when you're a complete stranger. I'm in really good shape and the amount of women who would touch my arms, shoulders, and chest when I'm out was too high. Story 6. Not exclusively a woman thing, but my ex would screenshot our text conversations and send them to her family and friends for reaction. Like mundane conversations, not even anything interesting. It felt like a very creepy violation of my privacy. Also, she was an idiot. Hope you see this, Laura. Story 7. Not creepy, but when a woman sees a single dad with his kid and feels it's okay to tell them they're doing great. I get they may feel like they're being supportive or whatever, but the stigma behind guys not knowing how to raise a child is infuriating. I have 50-50 custody of my child and she's raised brilliantly by both me and her mom. I can guarantee mom never gets random praises just for walking through a shop with her child though. It's not supportive. It's condescending as hell and please stop. Story 8. Honestly, hands down, women who exploit the emotions of men. We may not all cry in the movie theater, but we're not incapable of experiencing deep, painful emotional wounds. In general, it seems to be more acceptable for women to rag on guys for our image, like our height, weight, or income, while the flip side being that men cannot criticize women without being a pig. So yeah, women who nitpick guys for superficial reasons are creepy, arrogant, and covered with more red flags than a game of Minesweeper. Story 9. I have a friend that whenever she starts dating a guy, just lists me off things about the dude like she's listing a resume. Never anything about the personality or sense of humor or what characteristics about them she enjoys. It's job, career, college, earnings, house. I had to tell her it was getting creepy because it just sounds like she's getting a checklist to impress people, not find a good person for her. Story 10. This is only really for the gay man out there, I think, but having a girl instantly label you as her gay best friend as soon as she finds out you're gay, like, I don't even like you. Story 11. Setting up traps to test us. Being upset with something we did or said in your dreams, lying to our faces when we ask the right questions like, what is wrong? How are you? Etc. Story 12. This happened like 3 times in high school. Girls call you attractive as their way of calling you ugly, you know? Like some weird sarcasm and reverse psychology thing. One of those times, 2 girls were walking behind me in the hallway. One taps me on the shoulder, so I turn around and she says, she thinks you're cute. And the other girl says, she wants to suck your D. I just told them I have a girlfriend because 1, I do, and 2, I know what they're doing, and I walked faster. Story 13. Maintain a relationship with our mom even after the breakup. Whew, this man is not playing around. Story 14. Maybe not creepy, but for f***'s sake, stop pulling on my beard and arm hair. Like that shit is seriously uncomfortable, and pulling out a beard hair stings like f***. It's literally attached to my face. You're in my personal space, tugging my hair and causing me a little pain. Ladies, I don't care how fun it is, please stop. I'll make fun of your eyebrows. Story 15. Went out with a group of guys last weekend. There were 6 of us and this random girl started hanging around us like a lost puppy and just wouldn't leave. She was attractive, but so obviously desperate for attention that none of our group of guys really cared to give her any. This girl was just looking at everyone, batting her eyes and trying to hug everyone, but the guys were just pawning her off on each other. Not sure if this is pathetic more than creepy, but if a guy did the same thing, he'd be labeled with creepy. So yeah. She was creepy to me. I honestly thought she was a hooker or something, trying to sell services. The way she was approaching dudes, it's not normal. Story 16. This might be a cultural thing for Latinos, but there were some weird comments said by female family members to my son when he was a toddler. They would call him my boyfriend and ask for kisses in a very aggressive way. When I changed his diapers, they'd stand around and say, "De quién es ese pee-pee?" Which roughly translates to, "Whose is that?" Which led me to always change his diaper in a private room, even when told that, "You can do it here, it's okay. We're all family." One of my aunts even commented on how his peen has grown since he was a baby. Yeah, his whole body has grown. There's no need to talk about his penis specifically. Step away from my child. I guess this is all done in a cute or innocent way, but I never liked it. Story 17. Failing to realize that sometimes free time needs to be me time and shouldn't automatically be she time. Story 18. You have to install this GPS tracking app on your phone so I know where you are anytime I want to check. That's a serious trust issue. Yes, it is annoying. Story 19. Comment on my new girlfriend's post. I'll add a little bit more backstory. Me and the old girlfriend who had a bad breakup. I broke up with her because I was tired of the routine, tired of dealing with the standards that she held me at. To be honest, I wanted to be cut loose, so I cut myself loose. She got a boyfriend quickly after. I just did my own thing. Before me and the new girl started dating, she was doing this. I was blocked on every social media and on my messages itself. I believe she was just trying to be passive-aggressive. Story 20. A few of my relationships have ended because my girlfriends wouldn't talk to me about an issue in our relationship, which is weird because supposedly that's a male trait. I just don't like confrontation. Well, the alternative is that I'm breaking up with you now because you've avoided talking to me about the issue for a few months, when I keep trying to bring it up. So, Story 21. Unwanted physical contact. Was out to dinner with a bunch of friends. Coincidentally, they were all women, and the waitress was hitting on me, which involved obvious compliments, which I don't care about, and putting her hands all over my shoulders and upper chest. We all had to laugh about it after, but I was seriously weirded out by it. And were the genders reversed, I guarantee no one would have been laughing about it. Story 22. I'd wager that most women wouldn't do this and wouldn't think this is okay, but my now ex-girlfriend went through my phone without asking for permission. Story 23. As a gay guy, women seem to think that it's okay to touch me, in a general way, and sometimes even in a more inappropriate way. Lady, I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. Sure, we had a nice brief conversation, but don't touch me. Don't wrap your hands around my legs so you can gawk at the size of my legs. Don't squeeze my pec, or think that I want a hug despite never having met you before. I'm avoiding physical contact not only to be respectful of your boundaries, but because I also have boundaries I don't want you to violate. Consent works both ways, always. Story 24. X demanded I take down a single picture of a platonic female friend who I have known for over a decade, and who is happily married to a mutual friend of ours. Said picture was a part of a cluster of 8 total. The other 7 pictures were just group pictures of said platonic friend and mostly other male friends. Story 25. Straight girls who go to gay bars to be all like, yes, queen, ooh woo. And straight girls who go to lesbian bars and get offended when a girl hits on them. Story 26. The way girls share really personal things about guys in relation to society and the media would have you believe that guys talk about all the time and just objectify the women that they've slept with. I don't know if maybe I'm just hanging out with the wrong people, but honestly, the most you usually get out of a guy is just that they had with a girl. And the only time we discuss details are when you're just like trading stories. But girls tend to immediately report on things to their friends and share details that honestly could be embarrassing or uncomfortable for the guy. It makes me really uncomfortable and creeped out to think that if I sleep with a girl, I have to just accept that all of her friends are going to know every detail about the experience. Size, performance, how long it lasted, how I look, just feels like a huge breach of privacy. Story 27. The admin assistant in my office tells me to smile at least once a week when I walk past her desk. Go yourself. Oh, sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays. Story 28. Wife bragged to friends about our naughty life. We live in a small town, and now it feels like everywhere I go I'm being giggled and smiled at. It's really violating. Story 29. Late to the party, but I haven't seen this mentioned yet. Distributing private photos they got from guys to their friends without permission. I've caught several women doing it, and they'll argue about it if asked to stop. Yet another example of it only being an issue if the genders are reversed. Story 30. Glamorizing the male body at work or in other non-casual situations. I've had coworkers speculating about the size of other coworkers' peen in front of me, talking about marital aids, etc. If a guy was similarly casual about it would be considered highly inappropriate, but women seem to get away with it as innocent fun. Story 31. Being hypocritical about sexism. Hear about a guy hitting a girl? What an ass. Hear about a girl hitting a guy? Well, what did he do? Older man hitting on a much younger woman. What a creep. Older woman hitting on much younger man. You get it, girl. Making small jokes. Funny. Making fat jokes about men. Funny. Making short jokes about men. Funny. Making any jokes about a woman's appearance? Super not okay. Story 32. Always asking if I got flirted with, no matter where I go. Did anyone flirt with you? What the hell, it's flag football. Who would flirt with me at flag football? Story 33. I'm a straight woman, but I shared an office with a woman like this. Every time she found out some guy was gay, she immediately said shit like this. I just wanted to scream at her that gay people aren't stereotypes. The whole gay marriage and Supreme Court thing was happening around that time, and she didn't understand why gay people could stay married since she only saw them party at clubs and just have flings with different people. She didn't know any in long-term relationships. I had to explain to this grown woman that straight people are the same way. Some don't want a relationship and just want to flirt with different people, and some want to have long-term relationships and get married. I hope she understood, but it really felt like she just saw LGBT people as caricatures and not as real people. Story 34. Being addicted to social media, mostly Instagram. Like the worst one is, my phone is never on quiet, and anytime any notification appears, she looks at it no matter what you were talking about. Then, even if one has better manners, like having the phone on silent and can be without it for the first hour of the dinner, then dessert comes and I have to go pee. I come back, she's scrolling, commenting, posting, everything, and acts like I'm interested in what someone commented, and spends the rest of the night with her phone in her hands. I read through most of the comments and I cannot believe I haven't found this. This has become so common in Central and Western Europe. Story 35. Trying to isolate us from friends, especially other women, and prioritizing her emotional needs over everybody else in our lives. It's under the guise of wanting to develop a bond and get to know us better, but if you're paying attention, you can tell what's really going on. And also, having gone through copious amounts of domestic violence training at work, both as a requirement for employment and as part of the job since I record training, it is painfully obvious that this is something men do all the time to control women. Most of this thread consists of things which aren't limited by gender. Story 36. Bartender here. My general creepy experiences are with middle-aged women. They seem to think that they can say, attempt to touch, and do anything they want, especially at bachelorette parties. Bachelor parties are always just a group of guys drinking whiskey or scotch in suits, talking and laughing a bit. Bachelorette parties are a group of women with every peanut-shaped thing they could purchase, loudly harassing the staff of any place they enter. One of my least favorite experiences was a bachelorette group of middle-aged women who asked to take a picture with me because they had a picture scavenger hunt and a man in uniform was on the list. Seemed harmless enough and I wasn't too busy, so I agreed. After the 5 of them are around me, they start to say stuff like, another item is Stranger's D, and start laughing and tugging at my belt from about every direction. I had to physically shove one of them out of the way to get out of that, and then they proceeded to act like I was an a-hole for doing so. I freaking hate bachelorette parties. Story 37. I dated a girl who was overly sensitive to word choice. Case in point, one Saturday morning I was out running errands. It was a beautiful day, and I texted, "It's going to be a great day." She called me crying because, "When you say it's going to be a great day, it puts too much pressure on me to have a great day. Now I'm crying." All I could think was, what the hell? We ended up breaking up because it was a Thursday, which had become our date night, and I was going to go to her place. She started crying and broke up with me because I assumed we were going to see each other that night. Story 38. Perhaps not creepy, but I went to a metal concert to which I had planned to go alone. My girlfriend then suggested one of her female friends to go with me. I was relatively indifferent and just said, yeah, as long as she likes the music, why not get to know the people you spend time with? Fast forward 1 week. During the concert, my girlfriend gets jealous of the friend she herself invited to go with me. Calls me constantly, asks if I made out with her friend and threatened to break up. I was hard-pressed not to laugh. The plan seems to have been to send someone to keep me under a lens, which backfired on account of the next layer of her trust issues. Story 39. As a woman, I get pissed when other women basically treat men like crap, hit them and insult them, but whenever it happens to them, they start playing a victim card. Also, I really hate that whole, a wife has to keep her husband in check at all times philosophy. This is why men see marriage as a life sentence rather than simply making their bond with their loved one stronger by becoming family. Story 40. Ghosting. If this didn't become mainstream in the dating scene recently, there would be a lot more missing person reports fled by men who thought their dates literally disappeared without a trace. This is the stuff of 80s horror movies. FYI, ghosting is not an acceptable way to deal with most men. I get that there are jerks that need to be ignored for peace of mind, but there are a few of those men compared to the number of times my friends or I have been ghosted. Ghosting gives men anxiety, depression, leaves whatever problem you had with him to do it to his next date, makes men resent you. If you don't like a guy, tell him that, and tell him why. You're doing society a favor. Story 41. Being overly eager to share certain personal details with each other, like, look at my melons, is one noticeably bigger than the other? Also, an ex who I had maintained a friendship with, for a short time after the breakup, we would still talk once in a while. She called me and asked if I wanted to hang out. I said, sure, I'm at home, come over whenever. And she replied, okay, I'm already outside. I didn't keep answering those calls for very long. Also, some girls that talk like children, baby talk, and think it's cute. I'm in my 30s. I don't want to feel like a sicko, thank you. You're also in your 30s and know how to speak properly. It's not cute, it's creepy. Story 42. In the workplace, they have a tendency to swarm very attractive men and act like complete imbeciles. And I'm not talking about young single women who are looking to date or even sleep with these guys 20 to 30 plus years past an appropriate age to date them. Even if the dude is so freaking far out of their league he's playing a different sport on another planet. They flirt, ogle, touch, and harass these guys and give no crap as to whether or not they're into it. They're too busy soiling their undies to care. These are the same gross old witches who will hang one of those sexy fireman calendars in the office, in plain view of everyone as if it was acceptable, yet would absolutely shriek if they saw a single male coworker making friendly conversation with a female coworker, because it's not appropriate behavior for the workplace. Consider themselves feminists, but actually just think men are inferior species placed on Earth to perform difficult or unpleasant tasks, up to and including doing it with them. Story 43. I find it creepy when you've only been dating a woman for a few months and they already start talking about marriage and having kids. But then if you bring up not being sure about marriage or kids with them yet, they get deeply offended and start to think you don't love them. Story 44. Every girl I've ever been with has done this at one point or another. They even screenshot intimate texts and share them with all their friends. One of my exes even would casually share my private photos with her friends. She thought she was complimenting me because she was showing me off. I broke things off after that. What's your creepy girl story? Story 1. I met a girl online. She seemed normal enough, so we ended up going out for a drink. I found out that night that she actually lived an hour away in a rural town, but whatever. Well, we went out, had a drink, and then went to play pool. We drove over in my vehicle, and when we got to the pool hall, she checked her phone and saw she had a text from her ex-boyfriend. She proceeded to cry incessantly. I was trapped and didn't know what to do, so I offered to take her back to her car. She said she wasn't sure if she could drive and asked if I would take her home. I declined, saying it wouldn't be a good idea because A, her car was like a mile away. B, she lived an hour away. C, how on earth did she plan to get her car the next day? So she agreed for the night to end, all the while apologizing vigorously. The next day she texted me, apologized and offered to buy me lunch. She seemed alright when we were getting to know each other and I was bored, so I figured, what the heck, and gave her another shot. She brought her kids to lunch. When I saw them get out of the car, I texted her and said that it wasn't okay for me to meet them. She became irate, and her sitter canceled at the last minute. Even though the drive was an hour long from her house, she didn't find it important to ask if it would be weird for her kids to come. It was at that point that I stated I was no longer interested. Now for the creepy part. 2 days later, she texted me, but I didn't respond. She kept at it and kept asking if I wanted to go out the next weekend. After multiple texts, I messaged her and said I wasn't interested and had plans to take my friend out for her birthday. This resulted in even more irate messages about how she wasn't comfortable with me going out with other girls and so forth. This resulted in her getting blocked. Turns out she took a guess on where we would go, since there was only one nightclub in town, and she showed up. I had to tell the birthday girl that I was leaving and to call me when she was ready to go. My night was ruined. The birthday girl got home okay, in case you're wondering. But wait, there's more. A couple of weeks after that, there was an ice storm. The power had gone out in the area. I ended up going over to a friend's house to hang out since they had a generator. We were playing cards and enjoying ourselves. Suddenly, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Are you alright? I'm really worried." The message read, "I'm fine. Who is this?" I replied. "It's Creepy Girl." She responded. I ignored it and put my phone down. The next message sent chills down my spine. "I'm really worried. I'm standing outside your house and all the lights are off. Are you sure you're okay?" She had never been to my house, and I had never given her my last name. My final message before blocking her involved not contacting me or I'd call the police. It turns out she was a secretary or something for a police department, and she ran my tag to find out where I lived, drove over an hour to my house in the midst of an ice storm, and then got a new number. Also, she could check up on me. To answer a few questions, this all happened 6 or 7 years ago, so not recently by any stretch. While I can't prove she ran my plate, I was using a Google Voice number attached to an email address that didn't have any of my personal information and was used for this very purpose. Joke's on me, I guess. I found out she worked at the police department through a simple conversation online. We talked for about 2 weeks before meeting, so I knew where she worked, among other things. I didn't turn her in, and I won't. She was a single mother, and the father of the kids was in another state. She had supposedly been mistreated, and turning her in would have gotten her fired and or arrested. While I realized what she did was illegal, I didn't feel it would be right to put those little kids through that. I have no idea what she did with the kids during the ice storm. Her parents lived in the area, so I assume they went there. I have no idea where she is, but I'm pretty sure she's no longer at the police department. I'm fine and haven't heard from her since. I also don't live at that house, so surprise visits probably aren't a thing anymore. Seriously, dude. I was half expecting her to imitate Ghostface from Scream and ask, "What's your favorite scary movie?" Then show in his house wearing a Ghostface mask. Story 2. I've got 2 stories to share. The first one goes back to my teenage years. I was casually strolling past my school one day, minding my own business, and preparing to cross the road when things took a bizarre turn. Out of nowhere, a trio of heavily intoxicated women in their 40s or 50s started showering me with compliments about how good I looked. They flanked me to a corner, making it impossible for me to escape, and began trespassing on my personal space. It became clear they had ulterior motives. It was far from a pleasant experience, and what made it worse was the feeling that I couldn't confide in anyone about it. Society often dictates that, as a guy, I should somehow be flattered by such attention, even though it left me deeply creeped out. The second tale happened about 4 years ago when I was 22. I met a seemingly nice girl while waiting in a little cafe to meet some friends. We struck up a conversation, talking about topics like Pokemon and more, which lasted for a good 20 to 30 minutes. Eventually, we decided to connect on Facebook. The only odd part was that during our initial chat, she opened up about having been mistreated by her ex. I initially thought she might have been sharing it as a way to cope with her past trauma, so I didn't dwell on it. Later, I messaged her to propose a date, and she replied, revealing she already had a boyfriend. However, she expressed interest in hanging out as friends, which seemed fair enough, so I agreed, and we arranged to meet a few days later. As expected, she brought her boyfriend along, which didn't surprise me. However, what caught me off guard was her decision to also bring her ex. While I can't be absolutely certain it was the same ex she'd mentioned earlier, his behavior and mannerisms strongly suggested it was. To add to the discomfort, she kept obsessively discussing unpleasant topics that seemed impossible to divert from. I felt really grossed out, but tried to act civil, all the while internally pleading for them to please let me live. I haven't spoken to her again since. Ooh, something came in the mail today. I wonder what it is. It's Rufus Rugs! Got him! Now, hopefully after this ad plays, you two can say you got him! A rug from Rufus Rugs. Now me and the boys have been grinding non-stop 24/7, making one-of-one hand-tufted premium rugs. Now there's a chance you own a carpet that looks something like this. Let's just be real, it's time for an upgrade. And luckily for you, me and the boys from Rufus Rugs are at your service. We don't make those average cheap quality looking rugs. Nope, not gonna happen. Each one is handcrafted to perfection. No shortcuts, no robot assembly lines, and no dropshipping BS. Just pure rug grind. Whether you love anime, sports, cars, or anything else you can think of, we can turn it into a rug. So click the first link in the description and have your custom idea come to life. Story 3. Thankfully, this was an online-only interaction. It all began innocently enough when a random person on Twitter started asking me questions about my religious beliefs. At that time, I was quite active on Twitter and more than willing to engage in discussions about my religious views. However, I always approached it informatively rather than attempting to convert anyone or impose a single right way to live. The conversation, however, quickly took a bizarre turn. She began probing me about whether people who were dishonest about their identities should confess their sins. At this point, I decided to cease replying. That's when things took a darker turn. She started pestering me relentlessly on Twitter, day and night, extending to comments on my blog and even emails sent via a comment from on my blog. The messages were erratic and often hard to decipher, but I soon discovered that I wasn't her only target. I connected with others she had stalked and bothered, piecing together the disturbing puzzle. A few years prior, she had a dispute with a man living in New Zealand. After he cut off contact, she escalated the situation by reaching out to his family, friends, and employer, accusing him of being a kiddie fiddler. Given that he worked at a school, such allegations could have destroyed his career. Fortunately, he had warned his boss, who wisely chose to disregard these baseless charges, particularly since her only proof was that some divine entity had supposedly revealed the information to her. Did I forget to mention that she claimed to be a prophet who received messages from a divine voice detailing people's wrongdoings? Well, that's exactly what she asserted. There's no arguing with, "He told me you're guilty." Who would you believe? A mountain of evidence or a voice in her head? Then she stumbled upon me online and reached the absurd conclusion that I was actually a fake identity for the New Zealand man. Her reasoning? We both shared an interest in photography. Apparently, all online photos were exclusively my doing, and it explained why I never had any free time. As mentioned earlier, reasoning with her proved futile. According to the divine being, I had allegedly stolen family photos from someone else and was posing as a married man in New York when, in reality, I was the New Zealand man. Trying to argue with such a conviction was like trying to reason with a spirit. I attempted to involve the police, but she resided in Canada, rendering their jurisdiction ineffective. I and others reported her Twitter account, but she always had a few backup accounts ready to switch to. The cyberbullying escalated as she threatened to contact all the companies I did business with through my blog and expose my offenses, which were identical to those of the New Zealand man in her mind. I had to preemptively warn some individuals just in case. She also managed to involve the local police, but luckily, she didn't have my exact address. This is why I never disclosed my precise location online. She even posted threats on my wife's blog. This relentless harassment continued on and off for about a year. She would move on to another target, we'd warn the new victim, they would block her. Then she'd allege that we were part of some elite hacking group that infiltrated everyone's Twitter accounts, forcing them to block her when, in reality, they all supposedly agreed with her. She even extended these accusations to police departments, claiming that we had hacked them to make her complaints disappear after she was supposedly told they would arrest us. Neither the hacking nor the personal arrest warnings ever materialized, of course. Eventually, I managed to trace her IP address and devised a plan to block her from accessing my website. I reconfigured my site so that she would receive a 404 page not found error if she attempted to visit it, while everyone else could access the site normally. Being a web developer came in handy at times like these. She then took to Twitter to boast about her success in taking my site offline. Although she continues to plague the online world and target people, she has left me in peace for several years. I have since stopped blogging due to the demand of life, not because of her, and reduced my Twitter usage, so I hope she won't focus on me again. I don't wish for her to be arrested, but rather, I hope she receives the psychiatric care that she so clearly needs. That lady needs to learn how to keep her superpowers under wraps. Lol, she could have just talked to Alexa instead of that voice in her head. Have you ever had a creepy encounter with the opposite gender? Ward off the bad vibes by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Story 4. I was at a birthday party my friend threw for her dog. Well, it seemed more like an excuse to gather people, have a few drinks, and enjoy the evening. Among the attendees was another friend. Let's call her M. Although I had known M for a couple of years, our interactions were scarce, occurring just a few times annually. What made the situation more complex was that M was very drunk and very married. Her husband was present at the birthday party. As the night wore on, M struck up a conversation with me, asking about my relationship status, which at the time was very single. She then proceeded to ask me about where I had been searching for a girlfriend and similar topics. Then came an unexpected statement. She mentioned that I had been looking in all the wrong places and implied that if I desired to find a good girl, I should somehow tell her. During our conversation, M repeatedly attempted to hold my hand. Trying to evade this, I resorted to always having a handful of mini pretzels in both hands, using them as a convenient excuse not to engage in hand-holding. After all, it's rather tricky to hold hands when you're clutching pretzels. A solid, although unusual logic. The situation took a more direct turn when M stated, "I like you. I really like you." In response, I simply replied with a nonchalant, "Okay." This back and forth pointless, creepy talk continued for a while until M expressed her discontent with my repeated okay responses, interpreting them as a lack of seriousness on my part. Throughout the evening, she persistently trailed me around the room, making efforts to coax me into dancing with her, until I eventually decided it was time to leave. What added to the weirdness of the situation was the fact that M's husband was almost always nearby, just a few feet away, while all of this transpired. I initially dismissed the entire encounter as my imagination running wild, but I confirmed it was true when another friend asked me, as we were departing that night, "Was M trying to hit on you?" Story 5. There was this seemingly normal-looking, attractive girl I knew. I took her out on a date and we ended up getting drunk. She broke down, revealing that she had a medical emergency after getting with her ex. Now she requires ongoing medical assistance for her urinary system. She was only 23 at the time. She was visibly upset and tried to make me understand her discomfort by feeling her near where the medical device was. I wasn't quite into it, and our date hit a snag when she decided I was the enemy and called the cops, accusing me of mistreatment. I recorded her as she went haywire, hurling insults at me. The police arrived and it became clear that she was having some sort of mental breakdown. Eventually, she was transported to a psych observation unit at 1 a.m. Left with no other plans, I ended up playing poker. A couple of days later, she texted me and asked, "Wanna hang out?" Guess what I did? Well, I actually met up with her one more time. This time, she was on her meds and seemed much calmer. I'm not sure if I was seeking closure driven by guilt or just intrigued by the level of craziness. She apologized for a previous breakdown and mentioned that doctors were exploring the possibility of surgery to remove the medical apparatus. I decided to limit the tequila shots this time, as we had a decent time together. She even rocked my mic inside my car. Then I said goodbye and ghosted her. It was good to see that she was doing better, but I couldn't tell the emotional baggage she carried. For now, I needed to move on. One must be the Joker to handle that Harley Quinn type of crazy. Story 6. I dated this girl for a few weeks last year. She seemed nice at first, but as time passed, some obvious red flags popped up. The main issue was that she had no life outside of a relationship. No interests, no friends. She almost had a meltdown when I introduced her to my friends, and her only hobby was watching reality TV. Plus, she was still working at a fast food joint she'd had since high school, even though she was 32. When we broke up, she was upset but didn't make a big fuss about it. She wanted to stay in touch, but we quickly lost contact as I didn't want to drag things out. 6 months passed, I was dating someone else, and things were official. One night while hanging out with friends, I decided to snap a selfie of us and post it on Facebook. The next morning, my girlfriend informed me about a nasty comment from my previous flame. It was straight out of middle school, with her making fun of my girlfriend's teeth and thinking she still had a chance with me. Keep in mind that we hadn't communicated at all during those 6 months, and I never gave her any indication that I was interested in rekindling anything with her. I was furious about the teeth comment, but my girlfriend and I ended up finding it more amusing than anything else. I'm relieved I dodged that bullet. I'm sparing you the plethora of details, but there were many small things she did during our brief relationship that revealed how much of a loser she truly was. Unfortunately, I don't have time to write an entire essay on it. Follow up, I didn't expect anyone to read this, but I'll share some more juicy details. To be honest, I left out the details that made her not just rude, but downright creepy. I met this girl through online dating and she seemed cute and friendly. The first 2 dates went smoothly, and while she was less adventurous than me, there was nothing awkward. Then on the third date, things took a weird turn. She asked me to go to church with her one Sunday, her great-uncle's church to be precise. Turns out the church was filled with her extended family members, and her great-uncle delivered a sermon about hell being a real place for sinners. I met about 15 of her relatives that day, and they were all overly friendly in a churchy, stiff way. I usually have no trouble mingling with strangers, but it felt pretty uncomfortable.
After church, we were both off to a corn maze. It was September. That's when the alarms really started blaring. She told me she thought we were ready for the L level, as she put it. I told her I wanted to take things slow. At the corn maze, her coworkers, mostly in their early 20s, were present. We were likely the oldest people there, aside from their supervisor. I tried to socialize, but she didn't. On her way home, she asked if I planned to spend Thanksgiving with her. Remember, this was still September and we were on a third date. I reminded her that we'd only been on 3 dates and she barely knew anything about me, which was true, and I'd think about it closer to the date. The next day, I texted her, suggesting we should slow down. She understood, but followed up by saying she was looking forward to our journey together. The alarms grew even louder. I emphasized how important my friends were to me and that it was essential for her to get along with them. I had a wide circle of friends I hung out with regularly, and on our first date, I'd made it clear that my friends were a crucial part of my life. Strangely, she never mentioned any of her own friends. On our 5th date, I introduced her to 4 of my friends. She wasn't just nervous, she had a mini meltdown. I had to take her to my room to calm her down, where she started singing songs from The Sound of Music, her absolute favorite movie, to soothe herself. Yes, really. She was even freaked out by my friend's tattoos, specifically a Tetris block sleeve. Yes, we're pretty dorky. Our final date was attending a huge benefit event for one of her cousins who had passed away. I met around 30 more extended family members and got introduced to all of them, but then we didn't socialize with anyone. I couldn't stand the boredom. So I pointed to a table with people our age who were having a great time with lots of beer cans. She referred to them as the popular kids and refused to join them. Mind you, she was 32 years old. She asked me if I wanted to make our relationship official and inquired about a reasonable timeline for moving in together. Our breakup call happened the next day. Looking back on it all, most people would have called it quits much earlier. Truth be told, she was my first serious attempt at finding a long-term partner after only dating a few people over the years. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, so I tried to be flexible. I also don't think she realized that her behavior was weird and pushy. My impression was that she came from a very traditional family and had her own set of ideas about what dating should lead to, and she was just pursuing that end. In her mind, things like a career, passions, or friends weren't as important as starting a family. I also suspect she stopped personal growth around high school, waiting for Mr. Right to come along. When she wasn't doing her weird antics, she was a decent person to be around. Before she insulted my girlfriend, that is. And strangely enough, she was pretty good in bed. Miss Goody Two-Shoes over here is so peculiar, she's like a Wednesday Addams with a heart of gold. Story 7. Dude, let me share a crazy story with you. People find this stuff hot because they weren't there. I was a 21-year-old guy with zero experience, raised in a super conservative Christian family. I was indulging in some solo moments because I was pretty shy around girls, especially since I had spent most of my life in an all-boys school. So there I was, heading to work, catching the bus at the station when I spotted this girl. Well, if you thought she looked mature for her age, you were mistaken. She was quite the opposite. Not easy on the eyes, a bit on the heavier side, and not exactly the best fragrance around her. Anyway, I sat next to her because it was the only available seat, and she was busy drawing something. Out of the blue, she looked at me and said, "I'm drawing you because I think you're hot." I was speechless. Then she asked, "Do you know what FWB means?" Now, you have to understand that I was a military brat who had just returned to the US, so my English wasn't that strong. I replied with a simple no. She was in the middle of munching on a piece of bread or something, then she leaned in and planted a wet French on me. It was gross, dude. I could feel wet crumbs getting into my mouth. I couldn't handle it. I stood up, dashed to the bathroom, and started throwing up. I'm telling you, that girl didn't exactly come from a loving household. By the way, here's another one for you. One day an acquaintance added me on Facebook. When I clicked on her profile, it said she was in a relationship with someone. The twist? That someone had a fake account with my picture. I still can't figure out why I attract creepy girls. Story 8. I was at this small local festival feeling super bored and not really into the whole scene, so I grabbed a drink and started wandering around aimlessly. Then I spotted a fire breather doing her thing. It was pretty cool, plus the fire breather was pretty hot. During her break, she came over to grab a drink and we started chatting. She seemed nice and we had a good laugh together, but her break ended and she had to get back to her job. So I said my goodbyes and continued my festival wandering. About 5 minutes later, all hell broke loose when festival security got called to the fire breathers area. Turns out there was this totally crazy girl I'd never met before following me around. Get this, she confronted the fire breather, claiming that she and I were together and the fire breather was trying to mess things up between us. It was super creepy. Story 9. I started seeing this new doctor and the receptionist at the clinic was kinda cute. So yeah, I flirted with her a bit. We were in the waiting room with other patients around, just having some innocent fun. She flirted back, and it all seemed harmless and fun. But then things started to get a bit weird. She got more into it, like scheduling my appointments on days when she was working and even calling me directly to remind me of my visits. Then it got even weirder. She somehow dug into my records, got my cell number, and started texting me. She was talking about wanting to meet up, how unhappy she was with her husband, and that they were no longer getting hot and heavy in bed anymore. I noped out as fast as I could.
Men, your experiences matter too. What's your story of a woman being the creep? She took a friend of mine home to sleep it off, but had intimacy with him while he was intoxicated. If he hadn't seen evidence, she couldn't rehook up his medical equipment correctly, You'd never have known she did it, and she never mentioned it until I confronted her with the evidence. My friend group was very hypocritical about this, and I dropped anyone who said that this wasn't a serious crime and a reason to avoid her forever. Story 2. When I was a teenager, my family and I accompanied my grandmother to the hospital. They sent a translator automatically after learning English was her second language. The translator wasn't needed, but hung around just in case. She spent that time telling my mother how attractive I was, which then evolved to her telling me directly how attractive I am. I can recall comments including on my height, build, and skin tone. She asked about my relationships and poked around if I was active. My mom separated us after she overheard her asking for my phone. The lady was in between my mother and my grandmother's age. Story 3. I had just started at a new company. This was inside my first week. I was sitting in my cubicle, snacking from a bag of mixed nuts when a lady probably in her 40s walked by and stopped. She said, can I have some of your nuts? I really like nuts, but said it in a very weird tone. I said, very flatly, sure, and handed her the bag. She said, oh, no, well, never mind, and limped away. She had some weird hip thing. She left, she looked at the project assistant sitting across from me and said, I guess I didn't get it, and cackled. The PA looked at me and just rolled her eyes. I went back to work. Over the next year or so, she would make all kinds of weird innuendos like this, and I would reply as flatly as I could. Until one day my boss heard her and just said, Kim, cut it out. They ended up running out of work for her to do after a while and let her go. Story 4. More than a few years ago, I dated this girl for about 3 months and we were at my parents' house for New Year's Eve and she slipped a ring into my pocket throughout the night at some point. Later on, when I was walking her home, I realized I had this ring in my pocket and asked her if she knew anything about this. And she said she wanted me to propose. I very quickly said no as we were only 3 months into our relationship. On the first day back from winter break, I found loads of congratulations and weird crap in my locker. She had told the whole school I had proposed and that she was pregnant. The next day I broke up with her because obviously none of this was okay. Fast forward 7 months and I found out the night we broke up, she tried to code in her ADHD meds and my friend had to call the ambulance to her house at 3 a.m. Later that week, she tried to pay my pretty techie friend to delete all the suggestive pictures she had sold online in the last few days. After not seeing her for 9 months, she makes an alternate FB account to say she's 2 months pregnant with my phantom baby and how she likes to sit outside my window and think about me at night. After calling the police and a week of police sitting in the driveway, she starts a rumor that I watch her sleep at night. Her family has caught me on the new security cameras they installed. Luckily, I have not heard a word or any other weird rumors in 7 years. Story 5. This one woman at a local bar about twice my age was pestering me for a dance and not taking no for an answer. At one point she was dancing against me, trying to sit on my lap, constantly asking me for a kiss, etc. Everyone at the table was super uncomfortable. Eventually, me and my friends dipped while she was in the toilet and switched bars. I later learned from a friend who frequents that first bar that she did that kind of thing regularly. Story 6. I was 15 and she was a bit younger, maybe 12 or 13. She was my sister's friend. She was very forward about wanting to do things to me. She made me really uncomfortable and I wasn't really ready for whatever it was she wanted from me. I then get comments from my dad like, sounds like you're in there. And I start to question why I passed up on the opportunity to possibly have intimacy with a girl. For a guy back then, and probably today too, sadly, the idea of just plain not wanting intimacy made you deficient somehow. I feel like girls are pretty well taught to be wary of boys and to understand that they can say no. Unfortunately, the same is not true for boys. Story 7. A woman in my building had a crush on me. I wasn't interested. She had a beautiful friend that suddenly befriended my roommates, thus both of them were invited to our apartment for parties. I assumed there was a plot here. She, not the roommate, followed me around the apartment, trying to flirt a lot, always having me kindly turn her down. Finally, when we were alone in the kitchen, where she wouldn't be embarrassed, I told her I wasn't interested as politely as I could. She seemed to get the message. A few weekends later, I get home after partying with other friends, sloshed. The 2 women and my roommates are hanging out in the apartment. I go straight to bed. I woke up a few hours later with her in my bed, under the covers, trying to wake me up. I tell her to leave. She starts crying. I was very, very intoxicated, so I really just wanted to go to sleep. She's getting dressed and crying and passed back out. I woke up to her still in my room, giving my back a massage. I tell her again to get the hell out. She laughs it off and asks to see my thing. I vaguely remember her trying to grab my thing, but I was laying on my stomach. I also vaguely remember her getting under the covers 2 to 3 more times that night. Before I finally got up, went to my roommate's room and fell asleep on his floor. Apparently, according to the woman, I was a schmuck for not letting her do me. Story 8. This story may not belong here, but it's worth noting. I met these 2 freshmen when I was a junior. They're both cute. One liked one of my roommates. I wish the other liked me, but she didn't seem interested. I got home one night to an empty apartment. I pass out on the couch watching a movie. In our apartment, we had one of those doors that has a card key to open and close it with a bolt lock. We often forgot our card keys, so the first one home would rig the front door with a bolt out so the door wasn't able to automatically lock or close. I know, it was stupid, but it's what we did. I guess the freshman who didn't like my friend decided she wanted to see if I was home. I wake up to her kissing me. I'm 100% okay with this. She ends up staying the night. It's worth noting that I'd never spoken to this woman for more than 20 minutes and that I was in a room with about 15 other people. We didn't have any sort of relationship other than drinking once or twice before in a crowded apartment. I share this story because it wasn't necessarily a creepy story, but if roles were reversed and I just walked into a woman's apartment and started making out with her when she was sleeping, I'm sure it would have been looked at in a different light. Story 9. I was typing notes in a laptop. My classmate, next to me, asked to see my laptop so she can copy notes she just missed. I gave it to her. She types her number in my notes. I don't notice it until later in the week, but I'm not interested, so I don't call her. She sits beside me at the next class and asks if I saw the note she made. I told her I was flattered, but I was already seeing someone. I was not, but I felt awkward telling her I wasn't interested in front of our fellow classmates in earshot. She asks if I have Facebook. I tell her yes. She friends me not 5 minutes later. Class begins. She, in a loud whisper, says, "Your profile says you're single." I tell her I'm not officially dating anyone, but I like someone and it's in the early stages. Lie. She then says, "Well, then you can still take me on a date." I tell her thanks, but no. Now she begins getting louder. Not screaming, but being loud enough for the professor to hear. "Well, if you didn't want to take me out, why wouldn't you just say that 5 minutes ago? Who's the other girl?" There were a few more angry or loud questions. I don't know how I reacted, but I hate when attention is drawn to me, so I imagine I was just not responding and looking at the presentation. I forget her exact last words, but it was something along the lines of, "Well, you're not man enough to handle me anyway." To which the class begins laughing. The professor asks me to take the discussion outside. I tell him I have nothing to discuss with her. The professor then told me that I disrupted the class and to come back when I'm more able to manage my relationships. So I left and she followed, and I just kept speed walking outside until she stopped following me. There's been a few more, but I'll leave it with this last one from a few weeks ago. Story 10. I matched with a cute woman on Tinder and we met for drinks. The convo went well and I was into her. She asked me to walk her to her car, then on the way there she proceeded to jump me, making out. I was fine with this, except I hate PDA and there were people in the well-lit parking lot. I tell her I don't like making out in front of people, so she tells me to get into her car. We go in the back seat and make out more. This is better, but not great. I tell her I don't want to have intimacy with people in earshot, and literally 10 feet away. I offer to bring her to my house. She says no. I offer to take her to her house. She says no. Now, there's no way she would have known this, but I was attacked in a car, sitting in a parking lot when I was a teenager, so my mind is having flashbacks of that, then reminding me that there are people close by, and this conspiracy starts to form that she's trying to get me so one of these people can come by and easily rob me. My rational brain thinks this is a stupid thought, but I can't push the thought out of my mind. I tell her I don't feel comfortable having intimacy right now. I tell her I'm not really comfortable having intimacy in the car. She now gets offended, probably thinking that I'm not attracted to her, but she tries one more time to convince me to have intimacy with her. When I lightly push her off, she screams, Come on! Is your thing broken?" Now people are looking in our direction from the parking lot and I have an angry Brazilian woman yelling at me. This is my nightmare. I try to explain that I don't feel comfortable having intimacy in a parking lot, in a car. I'm 35 for Christ's sake. She then yells at me to get out of her car. Apparently I'm a schmuck because I didn't want to have intimacy in the car. So, this isn't so much creepy as it was a double standard. I was attracted to her, but when I said no, it should have been respected. Story 11. When I was in my early 20s, I was doing some work in a duplex apartment unit in a complex with several other duplexes. It was a nice spring day, so I had the front door open to get some fresh air. A woman that lived in the complex came to the door and stood just inside, chatting me up. She was flirty, but I didn't think much of it. She eventually asked me what I was doing for lunch, and I said I was skipping lunch, so she asked me to come over and she would make me a sandwich. I thanked her, but declined. She was very persistent about offering me a sandwich, and she wasn't taking no for an answer. Pretty soon, I realized sandwich was code for intimacy. I still kept resisting, and it went from being amusing to creepy. Finally, she disappeared for a minute, so I packed up my tools and hit the road. As I was going down the road, this car pulled up beside me, and it was this lady telling me to pull over. I pretended like I couldn't see her and just sped up until she was gone. Now my wife and I refer to making a sandwich as our code for intimacy. On a funny note, I used to get really hungry after intimacy, and more than once I made a sandwich because of it. Story 12. I was a server in a restaurant and had 2 girls walk in. I go over to introduce myself, saying my first name like usual. And the first 3 things one girl says in order are, "Are you straight? Are you single? Do you want my number?" She wasn't attractive, and it's pretty difficult to dodge that when I have to now serve her table for the remainder of the shift. So I disappeared for 5 to 6 minutes. Check my phone. I have someone new add me on Snapchat and Instagram. Walk back to the table and she tells me she was able to find it anyways. I asked someone else to deal with him for the remainder of the night, but I was pretty shocked that someone would do that with my social media from just a first name while working. Story 13. When I was around 20 years old, I was at a club that used to be mostly for gay men but had become a club for everyone. There were 2 women who told me they were over 50 and told me that they're cougars who go to those bars specifically to fool around with much younger guys. I told them that I'm gay and not interested. I was polite about it. They kept insisting that I should leave with them, that they could turn me straight, etc. One of them eventually just grabbed my back. The whole time I was saying that I wasn't interested, that I'm gay and that they need to leave me alone. When they grabbed me, I just walked out, completely left the club and started heading home. Didn't report it because I assumed that I'd just be laughed at and be mocked for not liking the behavior. It's been 8 years since then and I'm still tempted to get a rainbow tattooed on me in case it happens again. I figure that showing a tattoo may be a good signal that I'm being serious. Story 14. Not long after graduating high school and about to start college, I moved to a new house with my parents. The very night we moved in, I got a Facebook message from a girl I had never met but had a few mutual friends with, asking if I just moved into that town. I thought, oh well, she's attractive, maybe something will come of it. We started hanging out. She would always send suggestive Snapchats. This was all fine with me until I realized she had a boyfriend. I called her out on it, and her excuse was, oh, we're just talking. That was far from true. They'd been together for a while. I started to back off on replying and hanging out with her because I wouldn't want that done to me. I then started getting daily texts asking what I was doing. I'd see her car leave her house, and not 2 minutes later, she would start texting, even when I didn't reply. I was still getting Snapchats from her. I told her to screw off and that I had started dating someone, then blocked her on everything. Then she started texting from different numbers. She eventually gave up, but it was nearly a year of pestering. Story 15. At a job a few years ago, there was this woman I worked with, and she was very much into me, and I just didn't feel the same. Plain and simple. But despite talking to her countless times, telling her I didn't feel the same, I don't want to date a coworker and that I wanted her to stop. She would always hit on me, make suggestive comments, stare at me, and so on. Management wouldn't do crap about it because to them, and most of the rest of the world, men can't be mistreated. You should be lucky that you're getting attention. This woman sucked and was a creep and I hated her. I got a new job as soon as I could. Story 16. About 5 years ago, I went to an anime convention cosplaying as a popular character at the time, Victor from Yuri on Ice, and I was probably one of the only men at this particular one dressed as him. A lot of girls asked me for pictures, and while a lot were nice and pleasant, more than a few tried to grab me inappropriately, and even one tried to kiss me and seemed mad that I didn't like it. I haven't cosplayed him since, and my enjoyment of the series is somewhat ruined because of that experience. At work, I occasionally have customers touch my hair. These are usually older women and get angry when I tell them no or get away. A few customers have touched my back and hoped I wouldn't say anything. Sometimes it happens right in front of a manager. They usually don't see anything. I can't help but feel a little bitter. One time there was a male coworker who did the same to a female coworker and he was fired pretty much instantly. He got what he deserved, of course, but I can't help but feel a little bitter that I wasn't helped. I was also essayed by an ex and don't like being touched in general, especially by women. The only girl I've dated since then tried to be receptive, but that ended up being a lie. I told her that when we started seeing each other regularly and she said she was okay with it, I eventually got to the point where I could trust her enough to touch her and kiss her and cuddle. But intimacy was still off the table for now. I understand people have needs and many relationships are built on physical attraction in addition to emotional, but I thought she was okay with it because she said she was. Eventually, she said, trying to joke, if you don't sleep with me one of these days, I'm going to slip something into your drink. I was upset with this and she started calling me a baby. She cheated and the relationship ended after. Story 17. Before I met my wife, I dated a woman in our second time hanging out at a bar. She got too intoxicated and asked me point blank if, get more comfortable with her and do substances back at her place. It made me anxious and I pretty much immediately asked for the bill and plotted my exit. When she realized I wasn't interested, she accused me of being gay and followed me to our subway transit system, laughing like a maniac, asking me to stay and making fun of me some more. If the roles were reversed here, I imagine some dudes would have gotten involved and gone violent with me about it. When I was in my early 20s, 2 girls at a party cornered me and began asking me questions about how big my thing was, which they'd heard about from another friend of theirs that I slept with. It was weird, inappropriate, and not cool. If I cornered some lady at a house party and began asking inappropriate things, I'd get my bum kicked. The more I think about things, the more inappropriate and weird memories pop up of women being creeps to me. At the time, I just laugh it off, but nowadays I'm realizing how anxiety-inducing these incidents really were. I'm a millennial who grew up during an era where we were taught to protect and respect women. I don't ever remember being taught about how guys can be victims. Story 18. Not sure if creepy, but stressful, nonetheless. Was out at a bar on a Saturday night, and a girl whom I was casually acquainted with came up next to me to order a bucket of beer. We had only met like one time prior through mutual friends. There wasn't any flirting or anything like that. We said hey, and she told me she was out with a bachelorette party, and then I said, sounds like a hoot. Hope you guys have a good night. 10 minutes later, me and my friends were ready to leave. I went to the bar to close my tab and decided to buy them a bucket of beer to be nice. It was like $12 for the bucket. Not a big deal. I told the bartender the bucket was for their bachelorette party, paid, and left without saying a word to their table. 3 blocks down the road, and I hear some girls calling my name from behind me. They chased me down the street to tell me that they didn't want my beers, and that they weren't going to sleep with me just because I bought them alcohol. I was very confused and could only respond with, what? They told me it was sexist of me to buy them beers and that they knew I was just trying to have intimacy with them. I just decided to turn and walk away. They followed me for another 30 seconds or so, yelling at me how much of a schmuck I was, and of course, all the onlookers took their side. I had to avoid fights with 2 random large groups of other guys who blindly took their side. They literally stalked me, chased me, and pestered me, all because I sent their table some beers on my way out the door without ever even approaching the table. Well, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 19. I worked as a barkeeper or waiter in a higher class bar for 2 years and have a lot of stories to tell. I just got out of a really toxic relationship that devastated me, so I hit the gym 5 to 6 times a week. I was pretty shredded, which paid off for the tips I got, especially from women aged 40 and up. There was one woman in particular who really creeped me out. She came around early evening with some friends and they had a few cocktails. I had the closing shift, so I started sending my coworkers home around 1 a.m. Eventually, I was the only one left with 2 tables to serve. One of the tables was the woman with her friend. They asked me for a cigarette and I gave her and her friend one and they invited me to join. So I did. Because it was a late shift, no one gave a damn what we did after 1 a.m. We had a pretty nice conversation and she started to come closer, but I didn't care because I was basically used to some more mature women trying their shot after a few drinks. I told her that I was very sorry but not interested at all. She accepted it at first, said that she was sorry, paid, and left a little embarrassed. Again, I didn't care and hadn't spared a thought about the situation. So I closed the bar for that evening and went to my locker room, and there she was, in our back office. She wore a nice dress, which she lifted a little bit. I basically told her in a nice way to take off and reiterated that I was not interested in her. She ignored me and tried to get closer. Again, I told her to leave and took a step back into the guest room. We had some cameras there, so I tried to get in sight. Maybe a security guard was still there and saw what was happening. Basically, I knew that I was screwed either way if I didn't manage to get into the camera's vision. She pulled some silverish thing, which I identified as a knife at that moment. She looked at me and told me that I now do as she says or it will end badly for me. Luckily, there was still a security guard left who called the cops on her. As the cops arrived, her whole personality changed and she started to shiver and told the cops that I was pestering her. The security showed them the videotapes and they arrested her. I never did the closing shift alone again. I never saw her again and she never came back. Still, that's pretty scary and creepy. I left the bar a year later. Story 20. I used to attend conventions cosplaying as Bane, Dark Knight Rises. It's far too often that I'd be walking down the hall and someone would just run up and grab my back, giggle to themselves, then run off. And unrelated to the above, this might be beyond the scope of creep, but saying no repeatedly and her doing it anyway. We break up, she takes me to court trying to convince people I'm a threat. Fails. I go to therapy over the whole situation just to be told by a female therapist that I can't have problems because I'm a straight white man. Later, I found a better psychologist and am diagnosed with PTSD. Fast forward a little bit. Started streaming to help cope with depression or anxiety and gain a little bit of a following. One particular viewer becomes overly attached. I tell her I'm not looking for any kind of romantic relationship. Several times. She doesn't take no for an answer. Offers to rent a hotel room between us so we can meet up and pushes for my real name because screaming my stream name while doing it feels weird. I tell her again that no means no and to stop it. She goes into a rage and tries to gaslight me. I ban or block her for the safety of myself and my community. Don't get out much anymore. Story 21. I had the displeasure of working with this girl. She's one of those crystal and horoscope girls who became obsessed with me for some stupid reason. Anyway, she did things that made me uncomfortable, like making way too much eye contact. For example, she'd be laughing really hard at something and making direct eye contact with you the whole time. Anyway, I had the unfortunate luck of having to drive her to her car one night. On the way there, I accidentally said I had to run to the store after I dropped her off, to which she was insanely persistent in wanting to go shopping with me. I then got to her car and I said, "Okay, hop out. I really need to go." Nope, she sat in my truck for 20 minutes trying to talk to me about stuff. The whole time I was trying to get her to go out so I could go. She never got the hint, so I simply stopped talking. She finally got out of my truck and I swear I couldn't drive away fast enough. I didn't even go to the store after that for fear of her following me there. She's a very unsettling person to be around and I'm glad I got a new job and no longer have to work with her. Story 22. I had a friend get hit on by his girlfriend's mom, sophomore year of high school, and he left the girl just to never be around her house or mom again. And she contacted him on Facebook asking why he broke up with her daughter and asking if there's anything she could do to make him feel better about the situation. He took a screenshot, took it to the police, and made a report. He was very uncomfortable from the first time meeting her and would tell me about everything she would say or do to him. I honestly think he told me about it as much as he did because he was afraid of her and wanted someone to know, hey, if I ever go missing, look at this chick. Story 23. My time has arrived, my fellow men. Grab some popcorn and buckle up for a journey. So there was this girl at work. I worked at a restaurant at the time, who had a major crush on me, but I was young or inexperienced and didn't notice. She asked me if I'd join her for a drink after a shift. I accepted and we went to a bar, had a few cocktails and chatted. An hour or so into the evening, she admitted that she had a crush on me. Being the awkward guy I was, I said she was cute and that I would consider going out with her again. I had not thought this decision through whatsoever. Cut to a while later. We're both on the train home. We lived on opposite sides of the same town, a few stops from the place we worked, and she kissed me. Okay, I thought, and kissed back because of the alcohol. What happened next had me shook. Her hand went somewhere inappropriate and it made a noise that can only be described as a mouse being stepped on. I told her that I was not keen on my thing being handled in public and sat in a painfully awkward silence for the rest of the journey. Anyway, back at work, she began making endless remarks to me in full earshot of guests. I was too polite to tell her enough was enough. I eventually told another coworker, also male, about it all, and here's where it gets really fun. She's done this to him too. Turns out she had propositioned most of the guys at work, including a temp manager. Long story short, she ended up getting the boot. Story 24. This woman dated my brother. She faked being on birth control and almost terminated him multiple times because he wasn't ready to marry her right then and there, after tricking him into getting her pregnant. He dodged a bullet, honestly. She called upon squatters' rights to avoid getting kicked out of his house, even though she never helped pay any bills or anything, and she had an apartment and family she could go to. She constantly lied to the police about him, to the point that even the police started getting suspicious of her. She taught their child how to say bad things about him to child services. That didn't last long, though. Eventually, she gave up on the pestering. I don't know if that's a creep or a total psycho. Probably psycho. Story 25. In grad school, I had a colleague who was very physically affectionate with me. She'd hug me tight and squeal with delight. When our master's capstone project came around, we found ourselves on a team of 4, and the 2 other people bailed at the last minute. Apparently, she'd burned a lot of bridges. We started a month early on the capstone project. We had our first meeting at a local bar, but it was unambiguously a work meeting. For 2 hours, she flirted with me and kept asking for hugs. It was really gross. I kept physically distancing myself from her, and she kept closing that distance. I tried to keep us focused on the work, but she kept flirting. That project lasted 4 months, and it was pretty miserable. She had a history of lying about her romantic past with people, and I was terrified of speaking up, worried that she'd retaliate with a lie about me. And in a he said, she said scenario, given that this was at the height of the Me Too movement, I was confident they'd believe her and punish me. When she noticed I was withdrawn from the project, she forced me to confront her about it. Of course, she gave me an insincere apology. I kept my head down and prayed she wouldn't escalate things. The moment we submitted our final project, I blocked her on everything. I told the school, who supported me and took measures to prevent further mistreatment. I'm so glad that's over. Story 26. Met a girl at a club. She came home with me, and the next morning we exchanged numbers and she went on her merry way. That night, about midnight, I got a call from a weeping man talking about ending it all. It was her husband. I had no idea she was married. Anyway, I ended up spending 40 minutes on the phone with this guy. I checked her internet history and saw she had been Googling my name. He then found my number on her phone and called me. I felt awful. This poor guy. I did my best to talk him down, which is hard when you're the person who slept with his wife, and the call ended a lot calmer than had begun. I immediately contacted her and told her never to contact me again. Next day was when she started parking outside my house, just sitting there in her car watching and occasionally trying to call. This went on for a week or 2. She also showed up at the pub I worked at, which I'd never told her about. I assumed she followed me from my flat. Things were getting creepy by then, but the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, I stumbled home from a club, this time alone. I opened the front door, and my flatmate came out of his bedroom and was like, "You're not going to believe who is here." The wee maniac had gone to the club where she had first met me, recognized my flatmate, and went out of her way to seduce him in order to get back to my place. He hadn't recognized her at first, but her weird behavior and her asking about me made him realize what was going on after she was at the flat. She tried to get into my room that night more than once. Crazy woman. I hope her husband dumped her. Story 27. This is my coworker's story, not mine. He said he was walking home from our NASA building when he realized someone was following him. He asked, "Where are you going?" The lady replied, "Just following you because you're hot." He said that startled him, so he responded, "Okay, I'm married, so please go away and let me go home." The lady then ran up to him, grabbed his shoulder, and said, "If Rick Astley is never going to let you go, I'm not either." He said, "Is this supposed to be a joke? Very funny. Now I need to go home." She then said, "It's never meant to be a joke, so look at me now." That's when he started running, but she was chasing him. He ran inside and locked the door. However, the lady wasn't giving up, so she threw a rock through the window. That's when he called the police. They didn't tell us the rest of the story after that. Story 28. Back in my late 20s, I did the online dating thing, briefly. Matched with someone and set up a dinner date after a couple of days of chatting. When date night rolls around, we got seated at a table and she goes full steam ahead with the advances. Keep in mind, we've seen each other in person for maybe 10 minutes at this point. As dinner progresses, she becomes more and more aggressive with the advances, and I decide I'm getting off the crazy train as soon as I politely can. After dinner, she claimed to be too intoxicated to drive, so I drove her home. Uber wasn't a big thing in my town at the time. When I get her home, she's almost dragging me in the door, telling me to stay the night. I decline, using a very truthful explanation of needing to be up before the sun for work, and I leave. She really wasn't taking no for an answer, and I ended up just walking away from her door. I'm definitely not the most attractive person in the world. The longer I spent around her, the more I got the feeling that I was going to be used for a quick fooling around and nothing more. Her heavy-handed innuendo and comments about what I might be packing were not sexy. I was straight up uncomfortable and had me regretting leaving my house. Story 29. I'm gay, so I get a lot of people who think it's okay to make assumptions. Here are two of the most memorable instances. High school encounter in high school. There was this girl who dropped a note on my lunch tray that said, "I like you. Will you go out with me?" I replied that I didn't know her, and she immediately said, "I'm Daisy," big name, and I was essayed. My friend just walked off, trying to keep me from laughing or saying anything inappropriate, and I was stunned. I was polite and let her down gently, but since it wasn't a hard no, she told everyone we were dating. That was a fun rumor, especially when another girl I turned down got mad and her friend slapped me for it. That was a fun way to find out I was dating someone. Daisy kept up the obsession until I publicly told her to take off. Never saw her again. The second incident happened after I was out. I went to a club with a guy I was into and his friends. We were hanging out at the bar getting drinks when my date's very gay friend gave us help me eyes as a woman was holding onto him. I told my date to play along, went up and said, "Hey babe, there you are." This woman then said, "Oh, you really are gay?" Like she wasn't in the biggest gay club in the city. And she asked if we wanted a triad while her boyfriend was overseas. Yikes. As for my date and his friend, they really appreciated it, and we had a fun rest of the night. Story 30. My roommate said he was freaked out by the way this girl at work acted towards him. She was weird, to put it nicely. Well, we lived near work and were the normal hangout place after work, so everyone knew where we lived. Well, I was mad at him about something. He was asleep in his room and she came over. I said he's sleeping, but she's free to go in. That was a big mess up. So he woke up with her on the bed, petting him. Then she burst into tears. Said she was going to end herself, but if he had intimacy with her, she might not end herself. And if she did, she promised to put in the letter that he didn't essay her. He politely declined, like a sane person. Then she said that it was fine. He's in bed and vulnerable, so she would just essay him, and because he was a guy, no one would believe him. And then if she ended herself, she would blame him in the letter. Crap. So he started screaming. I rushed in, we kicked her out, and threatened to call the cops if she ever came near our house, and I spent the next week apologizing. After that, she never showed up to work again. No call-in, nothing. No idea what happened to her. Like really worried she named us in her letter and cops will come knocking at any moment. Except we saw her in Walmart like 2 months later. Luckily, she didn't see us. Story 31. I've told the story before, but here it is again. When I was 23, shy and awkward, I was taken advantage of by someone I thought was a friend when I was too intoxicated to consent. She was a couple years older and the sister-in-law and roommate to my work friend. I was interested in dating her. We'd gone out a few times, but nothing came of it. Then a few weeks later, I went out drinking with some other coworkers, got completely hammered, and we all ended up back at work friend's place. I was so intoxicated I couldn't stand up or speak coherently. A friend's sister-in-law came out of her room, held me to my feet, and had her way with me. I only remember pieces after that. When I woke up on the couch the next morning, I asked her about it, and she told me she wasn't even attracted to me. She only did it because I was pure, and she'd never had someone who's pure before. Everyone else that was there that night knew I went down and laughed about it. It completely destroyed my self-esteem and took me a long time to realize that I was essayed, and it wasn't my fault. If the roles had been reversed, I'd still be in prison today. Story 32. Signed up for a leadership role for a club in high school. This involved working with other student leaders at other schools throughout the country. This one girl leader in my region reached out and was very sweet, and we ended up flirting just a tad bit. Next night, she invited me to some video chat room thing. I was doing good to have an email account back then. I knew nothing of chat rooms. She said it didn't have to be on video, so when I clicked on the link, it was her and several other people, and the banner at the top said it was a vampire chat room. She also had a text banner going across her screen saying how much she loved me. I noped out of that real fast, and even dropped the leadership role, mainly because I realized I didn't have time for the responsibilities. The day after that, she sent out a multi-page email to all the leaders and the regional sponsor apologizing for being the cause of me dropping out and how she would resign if I requested. I hope her adult life is much less dramatic than her teen life. Story 33. I volunteered at a charity shop. A woman around my age would come in all the time and stay talking to me, would wait outside the shop for me. I never led her on and made it very clear I was happy, single, and had no intentions to be in a relationship with anyone. But other volunteers in the shop found it hilarious and would encourage her to bug me all shift. If she came in when I wasn't on shift, they would tell her when I was next in. I let my colleagues know she made me uncomfortable, but they just laughed it off. The fact that it was never taken seriously was what annoyed me. Luckily, she was harmless, just annoying. Story 34. I had a woman at a mall. Her suggestion. We walked around a bit, went to a restaurant, then she suggested we go to a bar, so we did. She proceeded to keep buying me drink after drink, which I didn't want, and she kept saying I wasn't a man if I didn't want the drinks. We'd been talking well enough before then, but at this point, her whole demeanor changed and she seemed like a different person. I'd say one thing and she'd rant about how she hated it. Then eventually, she randomly said that I was too intoxicated to drive and that she was having her friend come pick us up to bring to her place, and said she couldn't wait. I don't know what the heck was going to happen. I don't know her friend or what was up. I texted my brother who drove over and got the hell out of there. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.